High in the Pennines lies Saddleworth Moor. It is a vast, desolate expanse of peat and heather that hides a deep, unresolved history. The architect of that history was Ian Brady, a man who targeted children across Manchester in the early 1960s. He was joined by Myra Hindley, a willing accomplice whose participation allowed the pair to move through the city unnoticed. Between 1963 and 1965, the pair abducted and murdered 5 children and teenagers. Search operations in the 1960s eventually recovered the bodies of 3 victims buried in the peat. A 4th was found in 1987. But the moor didn't just hide the evidence. Its sheer scale transformed a string of local murders into a 60-year national search. Today, that search focuses entirely on one remaining victim, 12-year-old Keith Bennett. On the evening of June 16, 1964, Keith vanished while walking to his grandmother's house, disappearing just minutes after parting ways with his mother. While the other victims were eventually located, Keith's body is the only one the killers successfully concealed from the authorities. Despite decades of tracking dogs, painstaking grid searches, and modern satellite reconnaissance, his exact location remains unknown. Every probe and shovel that has entered this landscape over the last half-century has returned empty, leaving the case at a permanent standstill. The murders did not begin in the wilderness. The victims were targeted here, on the busy, populated streets of 1960s Manchester. Hindley used her appearance to bridge the gap between the city and the car, asking children like Keith for help loading boxes or finding a missing glove. It was a 30-minute drive from the safety of these neighborhoods to the isolation of the moors, where the terrain provided a natural cover for the crimes. This diagram shows the structure of a peat bog, an unstable, semi-liquid mass of decomposing vegetation. Over 60 years, these deep layers shift and slide. An object buried at a specific coordinate in 1964 won't stay there. The ground itself moves it. The killers chose this environment because they understood the landscape would actively obscure their work long after they left. In the mid-1980s, after 2 decades of silence, Brady and Hindley finally admitted to the murders of Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett. This led to a massive police effort to bring both killers back to the moors, hoping they could physically point to where the bodies were buried. The operation was partially successful. In 1987, Hindley's directions led detectives to the remains of 16-year-old Colleen Reed. But when it came to Keith, Brady's cooperation vanished. He stood in the center of the moor, claiming the landscape had changed too much for him to find his bearings. However, Brady was a meticulous amateur photographer who developed his own film to capture precise landmarks near the graves. For a man who obsessed over documenting his locations, his sudden disorientation on the moor appeared to be a deliberate choice. By refusing to pinpoint the grave, Brady used the featureless geography of the moors to keep the victims' families in a state of permanent uncertainty. Winnie Johnson, Keith's mother, spent nearly 50 years scouring these hills, often searching the peat by hand. She made public appeals to the killers and searched the moorland privately, hoping only to find enough of her son to provide a proper burial. Winnie passed away in 2012, her timeline ending without the answer she had spent a lifetime seeking. This lack of resolution frequently sparks false leads, like the 2022 amateur excavation that claimed to have found a human jawbone, only for forensic tests to prove it was plant material. Without a body to recover, every new theory or discredited discovery simply restarts the cycle of grief for the family. Myra Hindley died in 2002, and Ian Brady died in 2017. Both took the exact location of Keith's grave with them. Unless hidden documents surface, like the missing pages of Brady's unpublished manuscript, the investigation remains paralyzed. After more than half a century of sustained police work and scientific analysis, the physical reality of the landscape remains unchanged. For as long as Keith Bennett is missing, Saddleworth Moor remains an active crime scene, a piece of the Pennines that the public can neither move past nor forget.